Um, we're going to address what we like to call I guess we'll call it the Dodger problem around baseball right now. The the league looks kind of trending towards a lockout after 2026. The reality is the Dodgers are spending just ungodly amounts of money. There's an uneven playing field on the amount of money. And I'm not trying to sit here and sound like, oh, I'm whining, boohoo, our team's playing poor and all this stuff. I'm not trying to go there. But realistically, when you look at how the TV deals work, when you look at all the stuff, it's an uneven playing field. Like that's just the reality of the situation. And a lot of people, the guys like Jeff Passan, guys like John Heyman, Ken Rosenthal, all these people like to go, oh, well, it's good for baseball because it's going to make all these other teams try and put together truly great teams. I think that's bullshit, personally. They're not, because the reality is, and you're kind of seeing it with the Giants, I feel like right now, is a lot of these teams and these owners are going, why would I spend a bunch of money when we have zero shot at winning a World Series? Like, why am I going to go drop all this money to chase, you know, I made the joke about the Giants, to chase 86 wins and a miracle wild card appearance when we have no shot in all reality. So I think it's going to have the opposite effect. And we're going to kind of talk about how we think the league can potentially, and, God, I hate Manfred, but, how the league can potentially improve the current situation and what, the direction we feel like they should go. Now, whether they can come to an agreement with the Players Association, that's going to be interesting. It very well, we could see a long lockout, I think, out of this. But do you have any kind of thoughts? I know I have like a whole thing, but do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, I think that first and foremost, we need to somehow, some way, not allow teams to stretch out money and defer money so far back. I think it's absolutely insane that the Dodgers can push back money into an escrow account to basically get Shohei Ohtani for practically nothing, because they're going to be paying him when he's like, I think, oh man, what is it? 68 million when he's like 38 years old. Like that's just insane. And then the fact that basically all this money thrown into account is going to pay for itself, because basically you're making money off of jersey sales, your TV numbers, all the marketing that's done with Ohtani, and then just the draw he is alone. And it's like great for them, obviously any team would want to do that same thing, but they shouldn't be allowed to basically push like a $70 million a year player his contract over such a long period of time. It's insane. If Shohei's son makes it to Major League Baseball, he can make it to the big leagues and they will still be paying Ohtani's contract. That is ridiculous. And we're not talking a few million. Like I said, it's literally around 68 million per year at the back end of his contract. That's just ridiculous, because you're allowing the biggest team in baseball to go and just stretch out money, basically not pay the best player in the league all for the next handful of years, and then basically just acquire whoever the hell they want. That is insane. There has to be some kind of limits on this. It's too much. And then, there's always the excuse, oh, it's good for baseball because the Dodgers are going to make the league so much money. Okay, well, you have 29 other teams that just simply cannot, do that. And then there's always the excuse, well, the owners can be spending that kind of money too. Well, the realistically, the owners are not going to spend that kind of money when they're in a small market, because the team is not going to be that profitable. You can't just sit here and expect owners to take massive losses year after year. They're business owners at the end of the day. They're just, because they have money doesn't mean they're going to recklessly spend money when they're not going to be able to make that money back on ticket sales and jerseys and things of that nature, whether it's because of the market they're in or because the team they inherited, whatever it may be. You just can't expect every team to do that, because they're not operating under the same TV deal the Dodgers are. That is the reason why they're so willing to spend an insane amount of money. And obviously they have a great market they're in. It's a huge market. I mean, they have two teams there. So obviously, but it's just, you got to find a way to stop that. I'm not saying you necessarily need a super strict hard cap, but there needs to be stricter penalties because otherwise the Dodgers will continue to do what they're doing, or even get harsher with the penalties on draft picks too.
Yeah.
And make it to where they're literally not getting anything in the draft every year. And at some point you've got an extremely expensive payroll and you've got no youth coming through ever. And they're in a position where at some point they're going to have to take on some really dark years where they just have nothing on their roster.
Yeah. I think, and I want to acknowledge one thing with LA. Like, we could put a hard salary cap in and they would still be one of the best teams in baseball. Like, they've drafted well, or at least they've had a strong system. They've traded, they've sold high on a lot of prospects to bring in talent. Like, there are a lot of things that the Dodgers do, like just the style of ball they play. They don't give away outs. They don't beat themselves, even with ungodly amounts of talent. Like, they would still have one of the best teams in baseball, but they would not have a team that is nearly unbeatable when you look at it. Like, this team is ridiculous that they've put together and has virtually no weakness on the roster. So that's a big difference. So like that's kind of where I'm at with that. But kind of the way I look at it, and we talked about the TV deals. I don't have the very minute details on this, but I do know that a lot of the teams are subject. I think it's called like the 52-48 rule. Like, 52% they get to keep the profit, like 48 goes back to the, I don't know if it's like league for revenue sharing or whatever. The Dodgers somehow found a loophole with their deal where they don't have to pay that. Essentially, they get to keep a huge portion of the money. As Ricky pointed out, a lot of owners, like, they're not going to take a loss. You look at the people at the top two teams in spending. The Dodgers are number one, and they're going to make a 9-figure profit. Then you have Steve Cohen, who's paying like $74 million less, and he's taking an 8-figure loss. And that's how it would be for most teams. You can't expect all these owners, as much as we all want to be like, oh, they're billionaires, boo, freaking who, pay whatever you want. Like, these guys aren't going to just bleed out tens of millions of dollars a year just because the fans want to see a winner. Like, that's not going to happen. It's just not realistic. So it's just kind of like that part. That's where it's like it's an uneven playing field. And personally, I would love to see them go because you, as someone mentioned, the cap's probably a pipe dream, but I do think the cap is attainable with a floor. And obviously, the number can't be hard that it's like never going to move. Like, it's going to have to be kind of like what the tax does now. It's going to have to jump up a couple million every year, and you're going to have to keep moving it. But to me, go the way of revenue sharing. I'm pretty sure that's how the NFL kind of does their stuff now with all the TV money, is go the way of revenue sharing and make put a cap in there and then put a pretty significantly high floor and basically force the teams like the A's and the Rays and that are in these smaller markets to actually invest in the product, because they're going to be making astronomical amounts of money even on teams like the Dodgers, just like teams like the freaking Jaguars are making a ton of money on the Cowboys, Niners, Patriots, Packers. They're making huge money off those teams. So it forces them to do that. And if you have an owner like Jeff Fisher that's going to be like, I'm not going to spend that, make them sell. Like that, you're going to have to go some kind of route like that to get any kind of equity in the league. Because to me, it's not just a Dodger problem. It is truly a problem with all the small market teams just saying like, nah, we're not going to spend this money. So you need to find a way to improve the overall product. And I think if you put a pretty substantial floor in, I don't know what that number is. Maybe you hard cap it at like, I don't know, 275, and then you put a floor at like 175. I'm just throwing numbers out there. That would, there are teams around the league where you're adding $100 million to their payroll. Like, there is a lot more money to go around for these players. They're losing less money than they're gaining, if that makes sense. Like, the top end teams are only going to come down a little bit, other than LA, obviously, but there's a lot of teams that hover down in the not even over 100 million or low hundreds range. So I don't know. I think that's part of the solution. And then as far as the deferrals go, like, to me, the tax hit should be whatever the AAV is on the contract. Now, how you pay it out is between you and the player. If Shohei Ohtani wants to take $68 million a year for the 10 years following his contract, hey, that's on him. I don't care. If it's not my money. If he wants to wait to get paid that, good for you, bud. But the Dodgers tax hit should be $70 million a year, not 2 or 46 or whatever it is. It's like 46 because they put it on present value. Like, that's just, to me, it's a loophole that needs closing.
Yeah, no, plain and simple. And I mean, honestly, going back to the hard cap thing, while I don't think that's necessarily the route they need to go, I do think it would affect the Dodgers a lot more quickly had they gone a route like that, just because you're looking at, even if they go and trade all their top prospects for, back when they traded Mookie Betts, you're not going to be able to afford to just keep going and acquiring guys like that and then go and continue to pay them. You're going to get them for a year or two, and then you're going to either have to pay him or get rid of other guys. And that's the issue, is they don't have to do any of that. They can just keep stacking. And that's the problem. It just never catches up to them. And then, going back to the TV deal, I was looking into it, and the Dodgers jointly own all of their TV network, basically. So they're racking in all of the profits, and the Giants only own 30% of NBC Sports Bay Area, and the rest is all owned by Comcast. So, I mean, that's a big difference. Luckily, the Giants ownership group owns a ton of real estate surrounding the stadium. So, and then that paired with the A's hopefully eventually moving out of state, at least for the Giants' sake. The Giants are going to be making a ton of money as well. It's just, we're talking more Major League Baseball in general. The Giants have been bad with development and drafting. That's been the bigger issue. But we're talking MLB in general. There's just not enough competition for the Dodgers because nobody's going to be able to keep up with that. Outside of the Yankees, the Dodgers have the biggest cash cow in the league with their TV deal. And it just makes such a big difference when you're pulling in that kind of revenue from another source outside of just, your stadium sales with, as far as jerseys and tickets and food and all that stuff goes. So it's just, it's honestly a super unfair advantage. And I'm not trying to sound like some whiny Giants fan. Like, that's really not what it comes down to. It's just, it's ridiculous when a team like that can't win a real World Series. And then it comes down to, oh, we're literally paying everybody and their mother, getting rid of prospects who are not worth Mookie Betts, and basically able to just fork out whatever cash to him, then Freddie Freeman, then Ohtani, then Blake Snell, and you're not paying the bill on any of that. That's just, there's way too many loopholes in that. At some point you need to get a little bit more serious around the league, because just doing a little revenue sharing when it comes to, international pool money and stuff like that, and draft picks, a couple draft picks, it's not going to hurt a team like that. You got to get harder on what kind of, restrictions are going to be placed on them going forward when this new CBA comes out.
Yeah. And it's not like I said, I'm not trying to aim for like perfect parity. I'm not trying to discredit the Dodgers and how they operate. Like, they should operate the way they do. They're making a ridiculous amount of money. Use it. Good for them.
Yeah.
And they, like I said, they do draft and develop well. They do, sell high on these guys. They do play a good brand of ball. They are an attractive destination for free agents. Like, they're going to do all these things and continue to be one of the best teams at baseball. But I just think there needs to be more equity and more forcing the other markets to step up their game. And that's where I think this whole thing could improve. So,
yeah.
And there's a few. I'm just reading some of the comments. San Fran fan, his hit, I'm trying to find an exact number. It might actually be like 43 million on the tax. Following the 10 years, it's going to be like 26. That's all it's going to hit, even though they're paying him $68 million actual. But you're correct that typically the tax hit is AAV. So that's why, like, Robbie Ray this year, he makes 25 million actual. His tax hit's like 23 or something like that because of the deal he had signed. So that's the normal, but deferrals kind of fudge the whole thing and allow for a lot of a lot of loopholes to do kind of what LA is doing. And that's why I'm just saying, like, my opinion, it should be the tax. Like, if anything, they need to close that loophole, because if LA wants to do what they're doing, fine, but tax the hell out of them on what they're doing. Like
Yeah.
that's what we're asking here.
If they're gonna spend that much money, just make it hurt, plain and simple. I mean, the NBA did the same thing with the Warriors during their dynastic run. Same thing that Joe
NFL did it
Lacob.
to the to Eddie.
Yeah, yeah, going a little bit further back for sure.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, we have to remember that too. I mean, the Niners were kind of doing the same thing that the Dodgers are doing, but in the NFL before they installed a hard cap, and the Niners had to pay that bill at some point, and it really hurt them for quite a while. I mean, look how long it took them to get relevant again after that came into place. So yeah, I mean, you can't fault the Dodgers for taking advantage of the system that's in place. But when you're renegotiating the CBA, you do have to change these things. It's not good for the league. Baseball is at a point where they're trying really hard to get young fans engaged. And if you're a fan in Kansas City, Milwaukee, pretty much anywhere in Florida, all over the country, you're Colorado, you're not going to be engaged as a young kid when you're like, oh, the Dodgers are the only team that's good and exciting anyways. None of the other teams have any star players. It's horrible for the league. I mean, even in the NBA, in a league where you legitimately have stars going and jumping to other teams to form super teams or what they think are super teams, you really don't have that in the MLB for the most part, other than really the Dodgers and the Yankees. But you also don't have stars being spread out around the league like you should. Like Bobby Witt in Kansas City, that's a good start, but you need more of that to get fans engaged. You got to give them some kind of hope and some reason to want to come and watch a game. It's horrible for the league going forward. And baseball, of any of the major sports, desperately needs that young fan base coming in and getting engaged in baseball again.
Yeah. I'm gonna bring up Haruku's comments here really quick before we hop off because I gotta get going here in a minute. But I think he mentions like the Padres owner dying was kind of what stopped them. The Met, Cohen wants to win, and then he kind of brings up the A's owner. This is what we're saying. Like it addresses both sides because it's not just the Dodgers. Like there's a bottom half of the tax bracket or of the tax paying or not tax paying teams, but the payroll teams, like they're a problem too. That's why we're saying like a floor and a cap would be ideal because you force the bottom end to start paying and investing into their product. And again, why would they want a cap? Well, if you insert a floor that's high enough, there will actually be more money to go around to players.
Yeah.
You just have to find what the number is where it's going to, they're not losing as much on the top end as they're gaining on the bottom end. That's where we're at.
I mean, what other major sport are you seeing several teams in free agency not spending a single dollar? Like that is insane.
Yeah, I think there's like 2 or 3. Well, the Marlins finally signed like a league minimum player, I think.